Welcome to The Missing Piece. Today I'm joined by a friend and colleague, Melinda Arnold, who is also a sex therapist doing extraordinary work in a space that doesn't get nearly enough attention. We talk a lot about trauma, about surviving it, processing it, getting through it, but what comes after? What does it actually look like to move from surviving a painful sexual history to building something healthy, safe, and genuinely fulfilling? That's exactly what this conversation is about. Because healing isn't just the absence of pain, it's the presence of something new. And today, Melinda is walking us through what that journey looks like and what's possible on the other side. This is a powerful episode. Let's get started. Welcome to The Missing Piece, Cracking Therapy's Toughest Cases. I'm your host, Helene Boost, and I'm a licensed professional counselor. Joining me today is Melinda Arnold, certified sex therapist at Waypoint Counseling Services. In Tigard, Oregon, Melinda specializes in helping individuals and couples overcome sexual difficulty and pain to realize their full sexual potential. Melinda, thank you for being here.
Sure.
Was that a good introduction of you, would you say?
Yeah, I like it. Well written.
All right. So right here at the beginning, there's a missing link for my clients that I see come to a place of healing. We did all the EMDR, we did all the different things, and they are at a better place. But then maybe they haven't been in a relationship and all of a sudden there's a relationship and it's really difficult for them. And so that is today why I would like for you to answer some questions for us on that, to see how do you move from sexual abuse, all the pain of that, healing some of that, then to sexual wholeness.
I originally heard of sex therapy back when I was in grad school, and the idea was immediately interesting to me. My primary focus was this demographic, those who had encountered some sort of sexual trauma. What I had as being a sexual survivor or sexual trauma survivor myself, I think what I had felt indirectly and then what I observed in the people, the survivors around me, is that there was kind of this belief that maybe we could overcome some of the triggers or the trauma response, but that a satisfying, spunky, healthy sexual life was not really in the cards for us. And there was that part of me was very resistant to that idea, but didn't have a framework as far as how to bring someone through the whole journey. So from trauma to regulation and then to reclaiming their sexual identity or their sexual experience. And so that was really what excited me the most, was this whole idea of it's not only about overcoming the trauma response, it's also about reclaiming something that is yours to have.
Yeah. Wow. Yes, I've spoken to you a few times about this. We came up with that word, sexual disruption.
Right? Yes, disruption.
Sexual disruption, because it's not always a sexual assault that necessarily caused it, or something as overt as sexual abuse in childhood. Sometimes there's much more nuanced things. I grew up in a very traditional conservative household, and there was definitely in me a fear of sex and sexuality. And I think the group as a whole have that going. You know, I've seen other clients come through really religious backgrounds or conservative backgrounds, and they have the same issues. They have fear of sexuality and almost act in a way that people would act who had sexual abuse. Can you speak more on that? What is up with that?
Yeah. We are learning so much about this particular topic now, especially as we are doing longitudinal studies on people who were highly influenced by purity culture in the evangelical Christian movement. And this isn't just limited to Christian conservatism. It's high control or tending towards high control, more fundamental faith communities, and even just general cultures in general. Can I say general more? But a lot of these ideologies are often shame-based and equate what's natural to us, arousal, desire, pleasure, even like physical pleasure. You may have heard phrases like the flesh is evil, that kind of stuff. And identity as something, it conflates that with immorality and sin. And so it's so rigid, and does not provide the flexibility of really learning or seeking clarification. And I think with that shame too, and the social imperative to stay safe within our communities and our tribes, that there's a lot of fear to disrupt that because it's so heightened, to push against it because you may be outed from your community in some way, maybe not even formally, but in some way there's a sense of, I'm tainted, I've got the scarlet letter, something's wrong with me, people know it and they're pulling away from me. So there's a lot of incentives to go along with it. And also, I think part of these faith structures decentivize critical thinking. And thinking for self. So if we outsource a lot of our decision making to some authority figure, we haven't done the work of knowing ourselves. And that's pretty detrimental on a lot of different levels. So that's kind of this framework. And then we get into the specific ideologies that can be pretty harmful too. And you're right that there's not this like one traumatic sexual assault experience, potentially, though there could be, in there. But it's that consistent messaging and fear. The nervous system is kind of always at like a activated level, even if it's mildly activated. When we are fearful of our own bodies, when we're fearful of our own body responses, our own desires, if we're fearful of messing up. And I think that actually there's just tons of stories of people in church leadership, priests in the Catholic Church. There isn't this kind of space to talk about struggle or to talk about anything. And what that ends up doing is that it gets buried and it explodes in pretty negative ways. So, and so it internalizes guilt for sexual thoughts, curiosities, experiences around of arousal or desire that can lead to long-lasting shame and anxiety about yourself, kind of its identity crisis, about your worth. It also, there's so many things problematic about this. Oh my gosh. Creates a distrust in yourself, which is a pretty big deal. So we become afraid of our bodies. We're afraid of our desires. We're afraid of our intuitions. We don't learn to listen to our intuitions. And that leads to out of control, control versus out of control swings of sexual behavior. Thoughts or ignoring important danger messages within us, having very low understanding of ourselves, emotionally and physically. And then ultimately we rely on external authorities for guidance about our very personal experiences. And a lot of times those authorities have skeletons in their own closet. Fundamental, either religious groups or cultural groups also have really rigid gender and sexual norms. And so tends to be heteronormative experiences. Gender roles are pretty explicit and clear. How to express yourself as male or female is clear. So those who fit comfortably within those parameters see no problem with that. But it might be obvious how miserable it would be if you do not fit quite so comfortably within those very limited frameworks. And so, but perhaps less obvious is when certain sexual acts, such as penile vaginal penetrative intercourse, is considered like the most ideal and normal. Okay. But that is not always accessible for people for lots of reasons. Right. And so if we have this sense of my sex life it doesn't count, or it's less valid than, that creates shame too. I'm broken. I'm not wanted. This is what should happen. Also, penetrative sex is fairly penis-centric.
Yes.
If we're honest.
Very much so.
So women are cast in more submissive roles, and they often don't develop sexual agency or autonomy. And men can be in more dominant roles and develop attitudes of entitlement. Even the nicest of men can have attitudes of entitlement. or a sense of brokenness if they don't fit the mold themselves.
Yes.
The suppression of sex education and health. There's a big push for abstinence-only education. And
right now?
always.
Okay. Always has been. Yes.
Always continues to be.
The only way to do it.
There's a new wave of conservatism.
Right.
And unfortunately, the ironic thing is abstinence-only education does not reduce premarital sex and actually increases higher risk sex and the potential for unwanted pregnancies.
Yeah.
That is the data. So the public health consequences is that if you don't know, and if you feel shame about purchasing contraceptives or condoms or something that will protect you, then you won't. And that doesn't necessarily stop you from having sex.
Exactly.
So we are at high risk for STIs when we are not educated about how that works and how to protect yourself. And it limits consent education, which is a really big deal. And that puts us at high risk for assault outside, but also inside of marital relationships.
Yes, and that's a big one, right? That specific one I've seen over and over. We would think at this day and age with Me Too movements and everything that's been going on that people will know that it's not okay to be forced to have sex inside your marriage. And yet it is still a thing that's going on.
I don't know if you heard in the news recently, but there's a whole website about how do I drug my wife so I can rape her.
I have heard that. That is unbelievable.
It's tragic, and it's a really interesting commentary on the effects of this kind of. Honestly, this might feel dramatic, but this kind of culture promotes rape culture.
Wow,
so clearly.
Say more about that.
I mean, there's so many micro beliefs within that, such as, a woman is valuable if she's in a hypersexuality model. It's if she's super attractive and really sexual, and in a more conservative model, if she's submissive and pure, and if she's moldable. Right. And in both ways, I think that woman is submitting herself to the pleasures of someone else.
Exactly. She becomes an object.
A lot of, and this is not universal. I've known a lot of women who had reconstructive breast surgery or just breast surgery just for their own benefit, no judgment. But I think a lot of us consider enhancement, though most of the time it reduces our own sensuality, our own ability to feel and enjoy. Mm-hmm. We do it for the benefit of the male gaze. Mm-hmm. I think what a really common one in heterosexual marriages that came out of more fundamental backgrounds is that it's a belief in what has been verbally, like directly told to some of these women is your duty as a wife is to provide sexually. If not, he may stray. So we're already building this foundation of sexual relationship we're building it on a foundation of fear.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, I just do not want my sex life to be at all colored by fear. I don't want to be influenced by fear. I want it to be influenced by mutual love. And that actually requires us to know ourselves and then to negotiate what it is that we want or need from one another. And is the other person up for that? Are they willing to do that? Is that something they're also interested in? And what, what's the Venn diagram here as far as like mutual interest? At what point do we kind of give when we're like, but sure, I love you.
Yes.
But if it's because it's my duty, right. Or because I'm so afraid of them cheating on me.
Right.
There's no freedom in that.
Yeah, basically it cheats both of them out of a joyous sexual relationship, because even the husband do things like she's supposed to do this as her duty. He is having sex with somebody who is never going to be sure if they're really enjoying this. Mm-hmm. And she is doing this so that he won't stray, which is really...
and then she becomes resentful of him sometimes. Yes. or ultimately she feels like he's just using me.
being used.
And none of that is actually true.
Yeah.
But it comes from these like gender roles and messages, and it's
mold, right?
and I'm seeing the long-term effect of this, like decades after.
Exactly.
And it's just been revisited. And I hate to make this like, it's not necessarily along gender norms, but I always kind of resist using gender norms. But those who were taught like this is your job never get a chance to really know them, like what it is that they want. And then they kind of begin to believe this story of, I actually don't really like it, or I never want it. And I'm not convinced that's always true.
Right.
It's just that they've only ever encountered sex to be an obligation and a job and a task.
Yes. And this can be true for men too, right?
It really
they
can.
can feel like
Yeah.
I'm supposed to perform. If I'm not highly sexual, I'm not a real man. Those kind of things, right?
Yeah.
Again, just these gender norms.
Another issue from this kind of cultural influence is fear-based control and anti-gender politics. This is the use of disgust as a psychological tool to enforce restrictions on sexuality, which is super effective. And that leads to reducing autonomy from individuals by either legislating at the highest level, right, or controlling through like cultural bodies and interactions, people's bodies and sexual acts. And so scriptures of, Bible or otherwise, like, are used as weapons to be yielded or wielded instead of sources of hope and love.
Wow.
And that feels really damaging. I think what bothers me the most is that component of inflating God with this kind of shame.
Right.
Yeah, it makes me emotional just to think about that, but also angry that we've, I don't know, God is totally part of this. This is part of the human experience, which I think is ordained by God, right? All of the human experience, and personally. And so to make it seem like God is displeased with us for being sexual is so awful.
It is awful.
And it causes us to shut down a whole part of our identity, a whole part of our human experience.
For sure, yeah.
So the long-term psychological and social impact, high levels of sexual dysfunction and suppression of self. This drives sexual issues into the shadows, preventing open and healthy conversations. Which we should probably circle back to.
Yes.
And when shame is present, we cope with that in many ways, including either totally shutting down and separating a piece of who we are, or leading to out of control sexual behavior patterns. And they're hard to undo when our nervous system doesn't totally feel safe addressing it and kind of like openly just accepting what's going on and not judging it. It becomes like the big bad wolf. We just want to avoid it. If we think our sexuality is a monster, we think part of who we are is a monster.
Exactly. Yes. Talk to me a little bit more about the conversation then. Just talking to your partner about sex. Why is that so hard? So many people they talk about everything but that. That is still that thing that's not part of me. It's this thing outside. We're not talking about that. And yet we talk about everything else. Why do you think people don't talk about sex?
Well, in therapist terms, it's not fully integrated.
Okay.
It's a huge piece of us that's not integrated into the whole.
Oh, really?
So it's separated. And yeah, it's something that we're still able to do sometimes. That's not a guarantee.
Right.
But, with the lights off, after a glass of wine or after we've become really highly aroused or something, and it's, we don't have to be present completely. It's like, it's a compartmentalized part of our lives.
Yes.
But then when you want to talk about it in the sobriety of the next day, and the lights are on and you're looking at each other's faces and you're having to confront like this part of who you are, that is really difficult to do, and it's not fully integrated into who you are. If this is just another part of your human experience, it's not hard to talk about.
the integration is missing.
Yeah.
And you see this all over the place, not even just with conservative religious people.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know necessarily why that is, but I suspect it's because our greater society is highly influenced by conservatism.
Okay. What do you think can dissipate that a little bit? Maybe humor? Do you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I know
love
that
humor.
we use some humor, so I'm wondering if that's helpful.
I love humor. Also, there's some books that kind of help like give you a script, start the conversations. Well, there's one called Sex Talks by, what is her name? Vanessa Marin, something like that. That gives like, there's 4 or 5 conversations. I'm struggling to remember now, but it helps you. It gives you the questions to ask. It gives you like, and the first conversation is actually about why is this hard for us to talk about?
Wow.
So like, I think resources like that really help. There's like tons of these, they're not necessarily games, but like they're card decks of conversation starters. And some of them are meant for couples who have been together for a long time, but are struggling to talk about certain subjects. Google those. There's tons. There's a lot of options.
That's really fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So those kind of break the ice in a sense, get the ball rolling. But I'd say even for me, talking about sex didn't become comfortable overnight. I talk about sex every day at work.
Yes. So you're well practiced in this,
I'm
right?
really well practiced. And as a result, it's not difficult anymore.
Yes.
Every once in a while, there will be a certain topic within that I'm like, oh, am I really going to ask this question? I guess I am. Okay, here we go. So like, there are still layers that are not necessarily fully comfortable because I'm aware of how vulnerable and how intimate those things are.
Yeah.
But now I'm like trying to do an honest assessment. Could I talk about it all with my spouse? And maybe there are some that we just haven't, I don't know. I might be taking this for granted, but bottom line is it's practice. Right. It's practice. And so
the more you talk with your spouse about it too, the more it will feel
also
familiar.
With your friends and with whoever it will listen to it.
We are actually better talking with our friends or with us.
But I want to validate that, like, especially when it comes to like requests that might be outside the box for the couple. Mm-hmm. There's a vulnerability to that. There's a vulnerability for initiating sex even. We're putting ourselves out there in a really intimate way saying, will you meet me here? Right. And when the answer is no, or it's a scoff, or it's disgust, it is a harsh shutdown to the other person. Yeah. It is, I mean, one of the coolest metaphors of sex is that the derobing of yourself and exposing all of who you are is really it could be such a beautiful and loving gesture, but only done when it's done in a safe environment. Right. Where the other person recognizes just how vulnerable that is and holds you.
It has to be safe.
Safely. Yeah. And that goes even to discussing it. It has to be a safe conversation because the discussion of it is a version of that vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we have trauma and we're acting in a certain way that seems to the other person as like disgust, it can be so hurtful to them. It's like, well, your skin crawls when I touch you, so why would I touch you? Those kind of things can be really painful. So what I hear you say is that to tread lightly, to handle it with caution, but to go there anyway, right? Mm-hmm. I want to skip to the 5 dimensions of healthy sexuality. In your bio, Melinda, you mentioned a beautiful philosophy that healthy sexuality is personal, physical, emotional, relational, and spiritual. When a survivor has experienced childhood sexual abuse, usually all 5 of those areas have been fractured. And how do you begin to help a client rebuild across the different dimensions?
Yeah. If I can offer just an explanation for those 5 first, the personal part is our sense of self-worth, our body image, our appreciation of our sex, and our expression of gender, or our lack of appreciation of our sex, sexual beliefs, hang-ups, wounds. Those are all very personal to our subjective experience of all of this. The physical, I think sensuality, right? It's our desire, but it's also all the ways in which we are using our five senses to experience pleasure, hopefully. That would be healthy.
Yes,
the opposite of pleasure is pain.
Yes.
So I don't know. Sometimes they cross over, but
well, that's a whole different topic.
yeah. But yeah, pleasure and anyway, so yeah, think your five senses. We are sensual people. Emotional is the emotional experience of that physical intimacy, such as, do I feel close and vulnerable, or do I feel closed and disconnected? And then relational is how well we are connecting to other people. And part of that sexual experience doesn't necessarily need to be what we imagine sexual to be. It could be like, I'm really good at connecting vulnerably and intimately with my friends by speaking openly about, personal topics, that kind of stuff. And then spiritual is a connection to something outside of ourselves. This might be God, but it's really just this idea of I belong to something bigger than me. And when we've internalized a sense of sexual shame, we don't feel like we belong to any, we feel very isolated. So I would use this by thinking about, where's the window? Like, let's start with something that is working, even if it feels like it has nothing to do with sexuality. So, such as sensuality, as an example, is not limited to sexual experience. We use our senses for all sorts of things. One of my favorite is to really reflect on, what's your favorite meal? What does it look like? What does it smell like? Food and sex are very similar.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
As far as like a lot of things.
Enjoyment of it.
Enjoyment, chemical release. Like, yeah. It can be social. Often it is social.
And a lot of dopamine.
Lots of
released,
dopamine.
right?
Yeah. But it indulges so many of our senses. So I would be like, okay, then go out to dinner with someone you love, and notice what it looks like, what it smells like, the texture, the taste. What am I missing?
The fifth one?
Oh, you can't hear it. Well, maybe you can hear it. Anyway, but really like savoring that and maybe even narrating it with the person that you love. But if that is something that's accessible to somebody, and it isn't to everybody, sometimes we have to use a different example. But then I want to emphasize that. Where else could you experience something sensual like that? And could you maybe invite your partner to join in with that? And again, it may not immediately be a sexual experience, but it could be expanding our capacity to notice and enjoy sensuality with another person, specifically our partner, if we're wanting to better our sex life. And then it's building and creating new and more contexts in which we get to practice that. And it's baby steps. So if it's, okay, I really want you guys to touch each other, but let's not go for the full meal deal. I really like tonight when you go home, I just want you guys to think about setting an atmosphere where you're noticing smells and sights and also sounds. And then I want you to just, rub each other's faces for a little bit and notice the pleasure you derive from physically connecting with another person. And then we can build off of that. But, so we want to kind of offer corrective experiences in other contexts based on what they can already do. As we do that, things come up and it's all good stuff because we gotta, once we become aware of those things, then we get to address it. So I think as those come up, we might notice, or a client may come back and say, I realize that I have a feeling like I'm doing something wrong, or bodies just disgust me, or, so we'll start to expose some belief systems that we can start to address cognitively, but also experientially, in a variety of ways, but looking for where are the things that are problematic and how can we look to correct them. And it's complex. So it's bit by bit, whatever is exposed to us, we address.
So the role of the partner. Partner is important in helping with this. And what do you hear from partners? It's probably not easy doing that, but are they usually wanting to help? What do you think?
Oh man, that's a mixed bag.
Okay.
Partners are incredibly important in this. One thing that you and I have talked about before is this an individual process or partner process? And sometimes it can be where I'm meeting with just the individual and giving them individual assignments to do, because reclaiming themselves individually and knowing themselves is really important. Sometimes I meet with a couple and they go through like a retraining process together. But either way, if the survivor is in a relationship, their partner has to buy into this process.
Okay.
And the partner is so important. I often tell partners, you get to be a co-healer. Mm-hmm. And this is a sacred and beautiful privilege. I know sometimes it feels like a burden, but it's a privilege to get to help your loved person overcome something.
Yes.
And it is challenging. So I encourage partners to receive their own support, maybe their own therapist or support group.
Yes, because it's a selfish act a little bit there, but isn't it true that we would want to, I've definitely heard partners say that, so for how long, and can't really put a time on that.
Sorry.
Because, yes, if it's, I equate it to if there's anything else wrong with your wife, if there was something healing, inner body needs to heal, whatever's going on, you would give her that support and that room to breathe. And so this is another thing that you can't see the wounds, but they're there nonetheless, right? And so we're trying for her to heal, and you might need to back off a little bit with whatever you used to,
Yeah, and that can feel like a big ask, but it does start with that, with the partner kind of assessing their own contribution to patterns that have emerged over time that just aren't helpful. So often they unknowingly play into a dynamic that repeats wounds. And it is unknowing. Like it's part of our human behavior and nature to repeat patterns that are familiar, even if they're not necessarily good for us.
Right.
If it's my routine to stop at 7-Eleven every Thursday afternoon to get a candy bar, then it may not be good for me. Anyway,
yes, those brain pathways, right? Associations.
Yeah.
So associating even with something that came through the culture, the specific culture that you're in, is that a man needs sex often and his wife's supposed to give him sex. And now what do I do if, I've got you, you're supposed to help me with this. But what if she has some trauma and she's not really enjoying it? Then we need to back off of that. And it's not so easy when those ideas of sex and gender roles and things are so deeply ingrained, right?
Yeah. Part of that is that they've got their own belief system that's been influenced by wherever they came from. Yeah. And so often we're unaware of our own belief systems. Yeah. And so if there's hints of entitlement, or I need this or I will die, right, or this is her duty or whatever, then I think, if anything, I see that as like, oh, good. You identified something that we get to work on.
Will you throw some psychoeducation in there then?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, this is not really true, what you're saying.
Yeah, I can see how that'd be distressing, but it's not actually true. And it's another way to frame it for some of the partners is this is actually an opportunity for you to get to know yourself. You are not so simple of a human that this is the only way in which you feel loved and connected. Let this be an enriching, deepening experience between the two of you.
Yeah.
And why we're saying that, like, why is this, I don't know if I've said this explicitly, but so often this process requires us to stop patterns of sexual interaction for a period of time, because if we repeat something that is associated with negativity, we are only reinforcing that association. that narrow pathway.
Yeah.
And so if we want, and the stated goal, and I'll remind people, if what you're wanting is to experience sex fully present, fully engaged, fully participating, and if what you're wanting, partner, is that your partner is fully engaged, fully wanting to be there, fully present, then the way we do this is that we have to kind of start with a clean canvas and build back up. And we build these associations that are much more adaptive, much more healthy. And it's a baby step process of small, simple experiences to more and more complex sexual experiences. And so ultimately, most of the time, sometimes people have different goals, but most of the time we're after the same thing. And, but the journey can be difficult.
Yeah, no, for sure. Is there an amount of grief that goes with it too? I don't have the in the notes, but I was wondering, just grief for the lost years, if you will, that we didn't have good sex, or the years that I thought it was my duty to give sex to him, and actually now I feel so used because that was actually not what it was. And do you see some grief in some of the clients?
Man, Helena, I feel like I see grief in so many clients that are going through trauma recovery or sexual abuse recovery or sexual reclamation. There is always this sense of like, oh, I wish I did this earlier. I wish this would have been my experience the whole time.
Yeah.
And I mean, I validate that. And yet it's like, but this is your story. And I don't know how to, I won't finish that because it almost seems like a platitude. No, I don't really want to offer that, but
never too late, really, right?
It's not too. Yeah, it's never too late.
What's that other platitude? Rather late than never.
Yeah.
Right? So
yes. Yeah.
And never too late to step into more of our sexuality. Actually, that was something I saw myself changed over years. I don't even feel like the same person that I was 20 years ago. And the very narrow idea I had around sex and sexuality, not even being able to talk about it openly, all those kind of things. How about yourself? Do you think it's part of human development just to become more integrated sexually?
Yeah, well, I hope so.
It better be, right?
I hope that we're continually learning things about ourselves to the day we die.
Yeah.
And uncovering things or reorganizing things or becoming aware. Like they say, you can't change what you don't know.
Right.
Like as we, peel off another layer of that onion, how does that liberate us just a little bit more?
Absolutely. Well, sexuality, though, is very, it's a thing on its own. It's very intimate, right? Why I'm saying that is I've been asked before if I think that one of the worst traumas that people can go through is sexual trauma. And in a way, it feels true to me. I don't have necessarily, I have a little bit of research on it and I have it in a blog post on my website, but it just feels so very hard to come back from. Like it can really affect people to their very core, right? Relationships can be so hard. Relationships can be non-existing because of that. They can be an ongoing fear of, will I ever be able to do this with a husband or a wife, right? So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that. Why do you think it affects us so deeply that people feel scarred sometimes for the rest of their lives?
I think it comes down to it is a big part of what it is to be human. And I mean, sexuality is diverse. So that doesn't mean everyone should have this kind of sex all the time. And if you don't, then you're not healed yet.
Right.
But rather it's that fully embracing of our unique sexuality and integration.
Right.
It's just such a big part of what it is to be human, and to feel like that part of us is cut off somehow. I think there's a sense that we're not actually integrated.
Yeah.
It's painful.
It is painful. Yes, exactly. And I mean,
I want to not really go into the topic of the queer community because that's a whole thing on itself, especially when it comes to conservative religious groups. There was a lot of fear of that. We can just say that, is that many times people didn't even embrace or know their own sexuality because of sexual abuse in childhood, because of things that's happened. And other times they're just afraid of their own sexuality, right? So all the fear and the shame around it, I think if we can keep on working on removing that, we can maybe get to a place where sexuality is just easier to talk about, easier to do, easier to find out what it is that I like. I like what you said about it's not a certain way.
Yeah.
There's fluidity, right? So talk about the...
Yeah, you've said the word fear so many times, and I keep meaning to say like that is the problem. Mm-hmm. The fear of not being able to control ourselves, the fear of our sexuality as being bad or a liability to us, the fear of being hurt, the fear of whatever. Fear, I've had someone say to me, is a lousy GPS. It just does not direct us in a good direction.
Yeah.
And so as we use tools like normalization and validation and education, the intent is to reduce our sense of fear around it so that then we have this capacity to really assess what is true for us. And that, so that we got like that first kind of step of liberation as far as like, okay, this is not something I need to be afraid of. I can partner with this part of who I am. Mm-hmm. And then there's a layer of liberation, and I get to discern what is healthy for me specifically, what is true for me specifically. And, just like the world is a rainbow of experiences, the same is true in our sexuality. Mm-hmm. But we have to, like, that fear component is preventing us from really knowing ourselves.
Exactly. Yes. That is true for so many things, right? At the bottom of racism, of homophobia, of misogyny, all those things, many times at the bottom of those are fear. And so if we delve deeper down, that's what we find. And I hear what you're saying is sort of that's a layer that the fear needs to be removed. We need to look at what really happened to us in order to then discover who it is that we are, and to look at this rainbow, like you say. I love how you said it, just this rainbow of possibility of who we can be and finding out where we fit on there. Mm-hmm. But removing the fear, yeah, I think a big part of the trauma, getting rid of the trauma. So this last thing that I have, reclaiming joy and vulnerability. For a survivor of abuse, fearless vulnerability sounds almost impossible. What does the path look like to get from fear to joy? I do think we talked some about this, but, again, that true intimacy, very hard to do for people who doesn't feel safe, right? So can you say just maybe a last few words on all of this, the vulnerability piece?
Yeah, I can see how that phrase sounds terrifying.
Right?
Fearless vulnerability. What does that mean? I just am like exposed to the world.
Yes. Yes, I've heard people say that. They say it feels
that
like
sounds
I'm
foolish.
walking around naked, And
I'd say like that is foolish sometimes. And so I don't really demonize a lot of our survival strategies, right? Even dissociation, right, is our body's wisdom for protecting us. And so guarding ourselves, being conscious or being vigilant often is wise. But when it becomes problematic, we're in situations where that vigilance isn't necessary. We are actually in a safe relationship. Mm-hmm. We are, and yet we still have that trauma response. It is problematic for us. Yeah. And so I'm fearless vulnerability. Hear me, in a safe context.
Always. With safe people.
With safe people. Is like being able to finally take a deep breath. To breathe easily, to notice your heart rate is finally calm, to feel like you could be fully accepted and it's chill.
Yes.
And this is kind of what I mean.
Yeah. The whole nervous system says,
yeah,
I'm okay. I'm safe. Right.
Yeah. To offer vulnerability to people who are unsafe is unwise, and I wouldn't recommend that. But how do we do that? You ask for steps. Baby steps.
Baby steps.
And like I said before, I often encourage people to start with food. What is a food or meal that you can delight in? What's a hike that you can go on that you delight in?
Right.
And I kind of think like our way to self-awareness and to healing is actually through pleasure. And even though that sounds a little heretical sometimes to certain people,
maybe,
but it's that learning how to find delight in the simple things, to fully savor and indulge things,
to feel joy, right?
To feel joy in things,
surviving and being okay. How about feeling pockets of joy in your life, right?
And then we can expand those pockets. Right, to buckets, and then
I like that. Yes, pockets to buckets.
Pockets to buckets. That's what you should have named your podcast.
Yes, that would be a good one.
So, we build off of what already is. We look for that first, and then, expand that more.
Well, thank you so much, Melinda. I really appreciate you being here. You have a lot of wisdom to share, and I'm hoping to have you back. If you guys are listening and you are struggling with intimacy, or one of your clients are, know that nobody has to settle for just surviving. Sexual wholeness is possible. We have linked Melinda's bio on our website at waypointpdx.com in the show notes. And take care of you and your loved ones, and we will see you next time. Wholeness in peace. Thank you for joining me. I'm Helene Wurst, and this is Wholeness in Peace.